All right, everybody, Coach Rob here back with another video, and it's another interview. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that this is a bucket list interview for me. All of you know that for the past 7, 8 months, all I've talked about is my transition into carb cycling for this latest contest prep and how outrageously well it worked for me. Well, if you want to know who the guy is, who the OG is that I studied voraciously more than anybody else on the interwebs, it's my guest today, an OG in prep coaching, an OG in the business, Mr. Justin Harris. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me on. You say OG. For when I first started, there weren't prep coaches. That week I just called myself a nutritionist. We didn't even
Right.
say online coaching or prep coach, or there's a handful of us, like Ken Skip Hill, Milos, Chad, Cito, Pharaoh's doing it, but there was no one, and it was really just Skip and I who were working with the guys on the boards for the most part. And yeah, it's that's how long it's been since before this was even a job.
Well, and that was actually my first question. Well, and no, let me back up. For the people out there who don't know who you are, let's do the typical thing and just kind of let people know who you are, what your background is, and then we'll go to some of these questions that I'm dying to ask. And I'll be honest, for those of you watching, this is a selfish interview because I'm currently prepping for nationals in Pittsburgh.
Awesome.
This is the guy that I go to more than anybody else. And so it's a little bit self-serving because I'm going to try to get some real knowledge from this gentleman, but I think you're going to be wildly entertained and learn a lot too. But tell everybody who you are for those that don't
Uh,
know you.
I'll try to be quick. So I started out kind of an overweight kid, completely average. Hated that I was short, fat, and unathletic, and found weightlifting. Fell in love with it. From like the age of 9, it's been the center of my life. Really, it really has. I've gone all over the world with different areas of interest, but that's kind of always been the core. Initially, it's for football. I played Division 3 small college football. I was a two-time All-American. I'm in the Collegiate Hall of Fame at my school, or the Athletic Hall of Fame at my school. And then I got into bodybuilding, won the Mr. Michigan Capital City Classic, took and Junior USA's, and then I took 2007 USA's. And that was my one and done pro qualifying attempt. And for lots of different reasons, I left the sport. I did powerlifting for 2 years. I was two-time APF Michigan powerlifting champion. I had the Michigan squat all-time record at 275, all divisions. This is triple ply, so of course it's going to be all divisions. Totaled elite both of those years, and then I was with Elite FTS for a long time. I was with Optimum Nutrition as a bodybuilding athlete. I was with Elite FTS as a powerlifter, and then I had kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but I left the sport and I went back to school for math and physics, and I spent 6 years there. I have a master's in physics. I published 3 papers in atomic physics, experimental atomic physics. And I actually published a preprint in 2023 for theoretical physics for quantum mechanics, quantum physics. I theorized using ellipsoidal harmonic, ellipsoidal, oh my God, I'm so out of physics now, harmonics to map non-symmetrical rotations for it's the quantum world isn't classical, so it's flawed from that start, but it was pretty interesting. It returned the eigenenergies of the hydrogen atom, which is kind of the main goal. That's the only exact solution you can get in quantum mechanics. So when you develop a new methodology, when you solve it for the hydrogen atom, it has to give the correct answers, and it did. I was really proud of it. That's I have a research gate. I think it might be linked on maybe my link tree or something on my pages. Through all that, I've coached, and I started Troponin Nutrition, and I've been coaching since the 90s. I think we've officially formed the business in maybe 2003 or 2004. And then Troponin Supplements, my supplement company. And then what I'm most proud of by far is our new company, Troponin IQ, it's so hard to market, but it's absolutely remarkable. It's me. I mean, it's freaky because I can have an argument with myself, but it's my entire knowledge base in an AI format. So you just type on it, ask it questions, and it responds as me. And you said you've watched everything I've put out. It's been trained on everything I've ever put out, and I had over 700,000 files to train it on because I've saved everything, my whole career, everything I write. I have probably thousands of articles that aren't finished or half written, or like some of them are only half a paragraph. I've got an entire book not finished. It was trained on all of that, tons of unreleased content. So it answers with me, but even better, like we started adding new features. We have stock button prompts because people don't know how to ask the right question, or they don't really know how to, what do I ask? I don't. So Massive and Shredded are our two best-selling ebooks. They're $100 each. Entrepreneur IQ, there's a Massive button and a Shredded button. So $200 worth of value essentially for free, because Entrepreneur IQ is $29 a month. You press Massive, and it reads your data from your profile, everything it knows about you, and it learns each chat. It's got two memories. It's got your core memory, which is your profile, and it remembers that as you. And then in the chat, it's got its guided memory, where it remembers everything from that chat. So you can even pretend you're this person for a chat, and it'll respond as that. Or if you're a coach, you can go into the chat and say, I'm this, this, and this, and just copy and paste one of your client's stats, and it'll now answer for that person. But it gives both of those, so if you ever, it's crazy to me because we sell those books. We sold like 10 today. And every one of them, I'm like, man, if you guys could have got both of these for a fraction of the cost, and have a month, before your build again, where you can ask me anything. We just added photo analysis for meal tracking. So you take a photo of your meal, it reads the macros for the total meal and each food source. And at the click of a button, you can update it to your diet log, which is on there. And we're working on photo analysis for body now. So tried to be quick, but I wasn't.
No, and the reviews that I've seen on that app have been nothing but stellar and positive.
The reviews have been really incredible, but it's so hard to market because it's AI's new. But it's basically, you could pay $450 a month to work with me as a coach. You can pay $29 a month to work with me as a coach. I mean, it's shocking to me that more. I mean, we're doing it's done better than expected. It's been ahead of our metrics, but it's still like I feel like, man, if you know about this and you haven't tried it, I mean, you can even be a dick, spend the $30 and then just ask me 30,000 questions and print it out, and you'll have a 10,000 page nutrition fitness book or body PEDs, anything, like anything you could ever. My entire brain's on there.
Well, you're always ahead of the curve, always have been, right?
Trying to, yeah.
And that's why you're the OG, and you know what, as an OG coach, how did you get into this prep coaching? I know you said, admittedly, you're one of the originals. Is that basically that was through the forums for the most part?
Yeah,
and a lot of people don't
get into it. It got into me.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand what the forums were. Like when in the 90s, when I was into this stuff heavily, the first time, there were no forums. It was just,
alt.miss.weights or whatever on
yeah.
AOL. I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, back when I started in 94, it was, you just train until you puke. Your supplements tasted like a combination of gasoline and sand.
If you were
lucky. And Dorian was God, and that was the end of it, So the forums is where you really got started. And I love the forums because in this social media age, anybody can get on there and sort of pretend to be an expert as long as they've got a six pack, and it's, they can control the conversation for the most part. But during the forums, if you got on there and you didn't know your shit, you got flamed out of there in a second. And that's what I loved about it, because you'd better know your stuff.
It was a great education tool, because if you were in a heated debate, you had Google open once, I mean, you made sure before you typed anything, you were like, shit, I better know this. And it's really helped me, because now I'm 25 years into being the guy that I'm like, why have masters in physics? I'm supposed to be the science guy. So, like there's a whole slew of young guys just sitting with bated breath, waiting for me to say one incorrect science fact, so that, which is smart, but so it's forced me to be, I haven't been able to say anything nonchalantly about fitness in 25 years. I have to be confident in everything I say. And you learn really quickly. And because I remember vividly, like kind of making this, and I remember what it was. And I remember on a forum, it's weird, I remember this, but I made a post about people were cutting sodium in a diet. And I told them that's stupid. One, sodium acts like an androgen in the body. One of the side effects of low sodium, like you take aldactone too long, you can actually get gyno.
Right.
Women use it for PCOS or acne because of the hormonal suppression aspect of it. So you don't want low sodium. But I remember my specific wording, and I said, and also a hydrated body is better at oxidizing fatty acids for energy. And I sent it, and then I don't know, it clicked in my head, who knows, minutes later, hours later, days later. And I was like, why did I say it? I don't know where that fact came from. I felt like I knew it, but it wasn't mine. And I realized like I'm probably parroting what I read. And so from then on, I really tried to make it a point. I would only say things that were my words. And if I was saying something and I realized I was just repeating what I heard from someone else, then it wasn't mine. And I would go and I would just take, it takes 30 seconds, verify that it's correct, or if it's correct and what the actual correct is, so I can potentially reword it, internalize it. And now it's my fact. It's not some random fact it's not words that I'm repeating. It's a fact that I understand. I think that's probably the most important thing you can do in learning a subject, which is why I think the best way to learn a subject is to teach it.
Wow. So what year did you actually begin prepping people for competition?
I really don't know. I think it was probably 99 or 2000, but this is what he said. I didn't try to be a prep coach. I was a moderator in the nutrition section on anabolics, on Bolix in like 98, 99. And then at some point I was dieting myself. I had engaged or just married. I was working two jobs, we were young, got no money. And someone asked me to help them with their diet. And I was like, dude, I'm trying to prep for a show. I'm working I just don't have time. And he's like, well, I'll pay you. And that's how long ago it was. That's how there literally wasn't a prep coach thing, because I hadn't thought about that yet. No one was doing that. And so I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah, sure. I think I said like $50, like something ridiculous. But then like more and more people started doing it. And I remember one night I told my wife, I was like, man, this might be a thing. I said, people keep paying me to tell them what to eat, And at the time it was really just nutrition. And so one night she couldn't sleep and she made me just like a basic website, one of those free GeoCities, Wix or whatever, Now domains. We didn't keep it very, very long, but unfortunately we picked the name Heart Attack Nutrition because on the forums I would go by troponin or tropomyosin because they're involved in a muscular contraction and they're cool words. That's it. Troponin is also the marker for a heart attack, the cardiac marker for a heart attack. That wasn't the reason. It's because calcium rushes into a cell, binds to troponin, moves troponin off of tropomyosin, and allows the contraction to happen. That's why I liked it. But yeah, 25 years later, now I'm stuck with Heart Attack Nutrition.
It's working for you.
Yeah, but that's how it started. It wasn't, and I think it was slow for a while. It was like, 2003, I remember helping people. It wasn't until like 04 or 05 I had 7 people place top 5 at the junior nationals.
Wow.
And then Steve Kukla won the teen nationals. And it just exploded from there. And it's basically been my life from that moment on.
Yeah, you've trained some amazing athletes, and most recently, you didn't include that you were Brandon Curry's coach.
Yeah, I'm so bad at self-promotion with that stuff. Yeah.
Well, let me go ahead and help you out here. You trained for the 2025 Mr. Olympia, Mr. Olympia, Brandon Curry. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it because I'm just echoing what many of others said. I think he should have placed higher. He looked amazing, and everybody has said that. I mean, what is it like coaching these genetic freak Olympia caliber athletes that might be different from just like a regional competitor or just a gen pop guy who just loves bodybuilding?
I want to be careful with my wording here because I don't want to say anything disparaging, and I don't want to knock any other coaches because I really do respect the field. And I think there's a lot of things with coaching that are much more difficult than people really appreciate or think it would be. But anytime I work with a top pro, I'm generally, I'm trying to temper my words, but I want to say shocked, but I'm confused why so many top pros can maybe be known for missing their peak. Because as genetic freaks, you won't, it's much easier peaking a former Mr. Olympia than your average state competitor by far. Infinitely easier for a number of reasons, for the mental aspect, the genetic aspect, that they know what to expect aspect, that they're calm aspect, to their body does everything exactly the way the ideal body in a textbook would do. So if you understand physiology, I'll try to go on a rant here, but I always say, people say coaching's an art, and I don't think it is at all. I think there's 2 aspects to coaching. One of them is fairly artistic, but the first aspect is knowledge. And do you understand human physiology? Do I know if you're now a little watery and we're 2 days out? Do I know whether it's what we've done with sodium, what we've done with carbs, what we've done with protein, what we've done with movement, what we've done with body position? A ton of things that you really should know. And I think a lot of coaches probably don't, because to look good to your client, to look intelligent to your client, you only need to know more than they know. You don't need to know everything. Right. And so if you're a smart business owner, and this sucks, but this is the truth, if you're a smart business owner as a coach, the second your knowledge level is above the peak of your average client, all your effort should be spent on marketing. I was an idiot and I spent my effort on 10 years of college, so that's why, so of course I'm going to think that's the important thing. But the artistic part, and I don't know that you can train this if you're born with it or what, is knowing what a peak physique looks like. Not everyone seems to know it. It seems, like for whatever reason, when someone was flat, it's always been obvious to me. I think some people can't, they don't, it's not as obvious for whatever reason. Probably like why you watch the Olympics and the gymnastics judges are judging these moves that they all look the same to me. I don't know what the hell the difference in two vaults are, It's probably something like that. But those are the two things. Do you understand human physiology enough to understand why everything is happening, and then also how we fix it or continue it happening if it's good? And then for the visual, do I know what you need to look like in photos in your room, in a hallway with different lighting, and when that correlates to a proper stage look?
So really, at the end of the day, a good coach is a coach that has the ability to make micro adjustments and pivot in real time based on the immediate evidence that's in front of them.
Yeah,
Is
and know
kind of the way I
why they're
look at it.
making them. That's what I
Right.
hate the phrase "trust the process." I
Yeah.
mean, I don't like sometimes. I mean, you should trust the process, but the problem is, tell me the process so I don't have to trust it. Let me
Right.
understand it. So I hate that, because if I hear you trust the process, that means we're doing this and we're going to hope it works. Where if the process is, look, hey, it's your show's on Friday night. It's Thursday night. We're at the Meet the Olympians. You've been standing. Gravity's keeping fluid in your legs. We're carbing up. It's our high carb day. Water's been high. We can expect that there's probably at least 4 pounds of water that's not real, that we don't have to remove. It's going to be removed by laying horizontal in bed and getting better flow through the legs, and knowing those things. But yeah, that's, and you should be able to explain that. And if you, I mean, most things you can't explain. In one of my ebooks on the making weight for powerlifting mean, I think it's called, where I just detail gram for gram how a 30-pound water cut would work, where someone loses 30 pounds in 3 days before making weight and then regains that 30 pounds in 24 hours. And I lay it out, like each gram of glycogen stores 4 to 4.5 grams of water. So that's 5 grams of total weight for every gram of glycogen. Count how many, estimate how many grams of glycogen you're depleted, how many grams you're eating, how many grams you can potentially store. There's your weight there from glycogen weight. A gallon of water is a little over 4 pounds or 8 pounds of water. How many, and so you can calculate everything.
Right.
And your coach should, most of them won't, and most of them probably don't need to. They probably understand it more, in general terms, maybe not the mathematical aspect of it. But if they don't understand, we're doing this, it's going to cause this, and the result is going to be this. And it's just, we're doing this because I saw someone else do this, and we're hoping the result's this. That's, to me, that's the trust the process that I don't like.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and skip over what my original question here was going to be and save it for later since we've already landed here. But I've heard you mention very eloquently and simply many, many times when you talk about the components for success. There's obviously training, nutrition, for some there's going to be PEDs and the like. And you've always said that nutrition is pretty much the biggest lever that you can pull.
Absolutely.
And that's
It's
the
the only,
phrase that I use
your
constantly
muscle
with
is
my
your
clients.
muscle is meat.
Right,
It's food. The only thing that actually you put in your body and it outputs as new muscle, the only thing that can be is food.
right.
The other things maximize it, but without the food, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and you said also, and I've experienced this, when even the pros get together, they don't sit there and really talk about training because they're all training roughly the same to a degree. They don't really talk about PEDs because, and I want you to expand this, in the peptide discussion where you talk about, hey, PEDs have pretty much been the same for like what the last
Yeah, and there's,
40
what is there,
years.
50 ever made, and 10 that get used in regular rotation, and like 5 that are used 90% of the time.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of mystery there.
Yeah. And like back in the 90s, I was managing a very large Gold's Gym down in Central Florida where we had a couple top level pros there. Eddie Robinson was one of
Oh
them.
yeah, yeah.
And
He was on the
when
very
we would
first
all get,
magazine I ever bought.
oh yeah, when we would get together in the cafe, I can vouch for that. All they talked about was diet.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we talked about is changes to the diet. What are you doing during this phase? How are you peaking? What are you doing for peak week? What are you doing 2 weeks out? That
Mm-hmm.
was always the discussion. I can't really remember a time when any of these guys talked about training methodology, PEDs, because they're all doing the same shit.
I can tell you when they did. You can track a bodybuilder's basically. You can. It's like a hunter. Like they see the deer and they're like, ah, I think he's 4.5 years old. You see that gray muzzle? Like
Yeah.
you could. If a bodybuilder's talking about training, he's new. He's excited about training. Like that's all. He hasn't started the diet stuff yet. He's just eating his normal diet. Maybe he started taking a pre-workout, but he's not into PEDs or anything. Training's everything. And then they learn about PEDs and they start taking those and they think that's the magic key. And then they go
Right.
through a phase where that's all they talk about, and that's all fine and normal. The problem is too many guys get stuck in that PED phase. And the problem is there are a lot of PEDs, and you can't just take a PED for a day and know whether it worked for you or not. You got to take a full cycle. And so these guys take this cycle, their first cycle, test and deball, whatever, and they're sure they're going to be huge from it. And it doesn't happen. 12 weeks later, whatever, they're not huge. So then they think, oh shit, this must not be it. I need to try test and deco with GH. And you can go through a decade of trying, is this the magic cycle? Is this the magic cycle? And I'm not telling people not to do that. Go ahead and try everything. I mean, you should get it out of your system so you know for yourself. I'm saying don't get stuck in that decade cycle where there is no output. Because if you get stuck in that cycle for a decade and then after 10 years you learn that it's all nutrition, you're 40 years old. If your dreams are being a pro bodybuilder, it's too late now. Now, if you catch that, at age 28 and you're like, okay, I'm going to try all these PEDs, but I know this, there is, obviously they work and people, bigger guys probably take more and yada, yada, but there's no secret magic thing I'm going to find. Let me try these. The quicker you can get to, food is my life, the better you're going to be.
Right. And with that said, that takes us to carb cycling. Um, the major impact for me in this last prep was the incorporating the carb cycling principles. And I did them, there's a million ways that people do them out on the internet. And I adopted your principles first and foremost, almost to the letter. And the results were staggering for me. Not only, and I took 4 years off and I'm 57 years old, 56 mainly
Nice.
during most of the prep.
Impressive. That's hard. It's hard coming back as you get older. I've
It's
learned that.
hard. And after, 3.5 years off, I went back to the same training principles and made the adjustment to carb cycling. Whereas in the past, I was doing sort of a hybrid carnivore,
Mm-hmm.
diet along with pre and post workout carbs and structured refeeds. And that worked okay. But what I found with carb cycling was primarily, and then I'll let you get into the real nuts and bolts, was obviously I recomped far faster.
Mm-hmm.
And it made it more sustainable for me because I had the energy I needed to perform. And even later stages in the prep when I was trying to get super lean. Now, obviously, you're in a steep caloric deficit, you're going to suffer to a
Yeah,
degree.
there's no
I
hiding that.
found it far more tolerable with carb cycling to get through that. And just real quick, and this is a story I tell all the time, and maybe you can explain some of the science behind it because it's difficult. I got to 2 weeks out and I wanted to make light heavyweight because I wanted to be the leanest I'd ever been. And I wanted to be at the top of my weight class. I'd always been a heavyweight, but not quite as shredded as I wanted to be. So this time I wanted to make that, below 198 and 3/4 cutoff. And I was hovering around, I was always like 199, 200, 199, 200, regardless of what I did. And so 2 weeks out, I did do a couple of days, or on my low days, I did deplete the carbohydrate considerably lower. And then on the Monday of peak week, which I hate that term, but that's what I'll call it.
I was again. I forced myself not to use it for a long time. Just like when Facebook first came out, I didn't create an account. It's just too ubiquitous. You can't avoid
Yeah,
it.
you can't avoid it. So I was sitting at 199 pounds. And on Monday, after a little bit of a depletion and my days were a little lower, I added a considerable amount of carbohydrate on Monday, lost a pound.
Mhm.
And then it was like 80, 85 grams. And then coming off of a almost zero carb day on Sunday, Tuesday, I took it up to like 150 grams. I lost a pound. Then I took it up to 225 grams,
Mhm.
lost another pound. Long story short, I kept titrating the carbohydrates up more and more. And then as I came into Friday before weigh-in, and in the NPC you weigh Friday evening at, it was like 5:30 when I weighed in, still wondering if I was going to make the cutoff. I did make the cutoff at 196.4.
Nice.
And that was on a day that I took in 350 grams of carbs.
Mhm.
And then back to the Airbnb. And between like 6 p.m. and before I went to bed, which was like 11, I took in an additional 120 grams of carbohydrate. And I woke up Saturday morning, the day of the show, at 191,
Wow. Yeah.
191.4.
Yeah.
And it was just staggering to me. And I was absolutely diced. It was the leanest I've ever been. And then, when I tell Gen Pop that I increased carbs dramatically and got leaner and harder and more shredded, people just can't wrap their heads around that. So before we go into how to structure carb cycling, maybe explain how these people that are terrified of carbohydrates, they're going to make you fat, they're satanic, whatever. What are some of the mechanisms that would make somebody achieve more loss of body fat and get leaner as they add more carbohydrate?
Well, here's the thing, and this is a big thing. I think the scale has probably ruined more bodybuilding careers than anything else there, because the scale does not measure body composition,
Right.
especially in the short term. But I can't stress that enough. The scale is measuring how much gravitational action is, how much gravity is acting on your body, meaning how much mass there's in the body. Well, 70% of your body is water, non-fat, not muscle, not bone. It's non-things that we're trying to change when we're trying to get leaner or build muscle. It has nothing to do with it. So manipulating the scale. So what happened there is uh, glucose, or actually insulin, is a mild central nervous system depressant and a mild diuretic. It also causes a little bit of sodium reabsorption at the distal tubule. But when you've been really lean and depleted, sodium retention is almost non-zero or almost zero, because that happens. Like a fat body is watery. Is more, if you're lean enough, you don't have to worry about being dry. Basically, that's the easy way to say it.
Right.
So that's what you're experiencing. You're peeing more, and then you've got a little bit higher body temperature, probably a little bit of thyroid upregulation, a little bit of extra movement. And people don't think that means much, but when you're dying on a diet and no energy, and if you're not in cardio, you're just trying to survive. Basically, you're just sitting there at your desk, half alive. Well, let's say that, like, completely not talking, doing nothing, an immobile you for an hour burns 70 calories. So it is somewhere around there, probably a little more because you're bigger. But let's say you have a little bit of carbs, a little bit of glycogen, and some actual energy, not a lot, but enough where you move. Like, my hands are moving now. And now we've gone to just 80 calories an hour, which is still like a terrible metabolism, sluggish as hell. You don't have energy, your body's not warm, but it's 10 calories an hour more. That's 240 calories a day. That's half a pound of fat a week. That's 240. You do 240 calories worth of cardio and tell me that's nothing. And that's just, so there's so many things like that. And that's why people get messed up with the calories in versus calories out, because that's all nutrition is. And it's not even nutrition. That's not a nutrition question. A calorie is a unit of energy. It has nothing to do with nutrition. It's like, like, if I don't supply electricity to my light bulb, it doesn't work. And how much light my light bulb outputs is how much electricity was fed. Energy in, energy out. It's the most fundamental rule of the universe. Energy is conserved. Whatever energy is, there's some amount of it in the universe, and we transfer it back and forth. You can't create it. It doesn't come from nothing. It'd be great if it did, because we wouldn't be relying on big oil and electricity. We would just snap our fingers and have unlimited power. I'd be running some kind of fusion computer software here. My AI would be so outrageous if I could do that, but we can't. But what confused is they only look at the calorie in portion of that. They say, I ate this many calories before and I was gaining weight. Now I ate that same number of calories. Now I'm losing weight. Well, that's because your calories out has changed, and it's little things. We just saw that hardly anything changed. You could still have a terrible metabolism, still be cold, still have no energy, still be dieting, still be low carb, still be miserable, but you gain that 10 extra calories an hour of just actual normal human movement, not being a complete dead slug. That's half a pound of fat a week. That's 8 pounds of fat over a contest prep. That tiny little thing where you did everything wrong still. You had a shit metabolism all prep. You didn't do anything good. You just didn't do it as terrible as you could have. Now you're talking 8 pounds of body fat difference, which is the difference between third call out and potentially winning.
Right. Right. It worked spectacular. And it worked spectacular through the entire prep. And
we can break it down by, like, mathematically too, if you want, also, like, the why it works.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to express anything you want, because
I try not to get these are like too long on tangents, and I know people hate them because they're hard to follow. I'll try to be quick. There's 3 macros: protein, carbs, and fat. Okay, that's what we get to play with, and we get some energy amount. Those 3. It's if you think of it as a gas tank in your car, and you have 3 gas tanks. Think of it, that way. That's because that's all we're doing. We're supplying fuel, and we burn it off. If we don't burn all of it off, whatever we didn't burn stays there in the tank. That's the same as the body. But because there's the 3 different gas tanks, we can hack that system a little bit. Let's say someone your size, if I fed you like low to moderate protein, 250 grams a day, just kind of not high, not, right in the middle, and I gave you 500 grams of carbs with very low fat, it's not super high calorie. That's probably around what your metabolic rate is.
Mhm.
If it's not, we'll just pretend it is, just because they're easy numbers, 250, 500. Well, you can probably store about 1,000 grams of glycogen at your size. So let's do extreme case. You depleted to nothing and see what happens. So you've depleted. Let's just say you depleted 500 grams. Make it easy. So you're not dead. You depleted half your glycogen stores. Now we have 500 grams of glycogen we can fill. Plus we know we can eat 500 grams of carbs in the proper, low fat diet, the proper amount of protein. We can eat that many carbs without storing fat. Well, so now we add that 500 grams plus the 500 grams you burn. Now you're eating 1,000 grams of carbs that day, and we're not storing any fat. We're doing a normal metabolism, plus we're restoring the glycogen we burned. And so we say, okay, yeah, but that's net zero. We were eating that many calories before. Now we're back to baseline. What's the difference? Well, it is all those differences. Now you got maximized glycogen storage. Your energy output is so much higher, way more than 10 calories an hour. We're probably talking at least a pound of fat a week difference for doing the same calorie output. Thyroid upregulation. How much better is your training going to be? If you think 10 calories an hour just sitting there, imagine how much more calories you're burning. If you're doing squats with 225 because you're exhausted versus squats with 405 because you have a little glycogen, you might be burning 60% more calories. That might be 500 calories a leg workout. Well, that's a big difference there. Now we're at 10 calories an hour plus that. Now we're at 750 calories extra a day on the same diet. And those calorie out things, that's where people get hung up on. But that's what carb cycling does, is it says, yeah, all we can do is calories in, calories out. But we don't just have calories. We have 3 different forms of them, and we can manipulate them at the right time. We can deplete glycogen really hard on low days, keep fats a little higher. Those are low calorie days. Protein's higher. We don't worry about muscle loss. Those are just pure fat burning days. And then right when we start getting so depleted that our metabolic rate will decrease, our movement will decrease, and we get all those bad things, boom, mega high day, we're back recharged, restored. And the net output is, for the same calories in over a 7-day period, your calories out can be much, much higher.
Mm-hmm. Makes total sense to me. It worked for me. It was amazing. And, I would regularly do a high day and obviously be a little bigger on the scale the next day because of the glycogen and the water retention, which is great. And performance was through the roof. And there were many times where 48 hours after the high day, I'd be down a pound and I'd be leaner, and performance never waned. It was always the best it's ever been. It was really until 2 or 3 weeks out for the entire 7 months prep that I actually felt like the training was a little bit of a struggle. And, I would look at my workout partner and say, like, I'm in a deficit. I'm dieting hard, but we would train our asses off.
Yeah.
And it didn't used to be like that. And that was another big difference with the carb cycling. So when you structure carb cycling for a client, do you have sort of a base formula that you begin with? And then,
I mean, I did, decades ago. It's almost hard to even explain at this point. This is all I've done with my life. I was a kid when I started doing it. I don't remember a time where I didn't know essential amino acids. I didn't know what protein was, carbohydrates, what glucose was. It's been since I was a teenager, basically, it's been all I do all day. I mean, I've been a high volume coach that whole time. I've written articles that whole time. I've done blogs the whole time. I've done podcasts. So I don't have formulas anymore. It's hard to even explain, but I just know. And
yeah,
I feel like I'm really in a groove with peaking guys right now. It feels like, man, like there's like a movie of my life. This would be like the Adam Sandler movie where some genie came down and gave me like because it, like, people send their check-ins, and it's just like, I don't even have to, it's like my brain just knows exactly I'm just in a really good groove right now. But unfortunately, because of that, I don't have hard numbers for you. Now, Massive and Shredded, they use algorithms, and they're great, but they're not individualized. It has to be, I had to build an algorithm that would produce the right fat loss diet for a 100-pound woman as a 6'6", 360-pound man, So it's, in the bell curve of optimal, it covers just about everybody, but there's a few percentage points at the peak of the, in each person that you could isolate in. But if you just look at those, that's pretty close to what the formulas are. But my carb cycle is much more extreme than most people. I'm not like a 200 grams, 300 grams, 400 grams. on like 150 grams on, whatever, on days you don't train, maybe 300 grams on days you do train. And then one day a week, we might do 1,000 or more.
Right. Yeah, I started out by doing two times my body weight on my moderate day, and then I titrated that probably down by a third on my low day, and then I almost doubled it on my high day.
Yep, that's about right.
That's
And
where I
I want to
started.
stress, because this gets like misconstrued a lot. I don't technically do carb cycling. That's just what I call it, I guess. But all three macros change. You don't
Okay.
have your protein's different. Usually, medium and low days are about the same, but your protein's different. Carbs are obviously different, but fats are also different each day. Also,
Well, I guess so. Was it a mistake for me to keep protein consistent on all 3 days and just manipulate the fat? I mean, I
no, that's a
lower.
good topic actually. Not really, because almost all the protein you eat is a carbohydrate when it gets used by the body, anyways. And people hate this, and I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it. I'm just going to have you guys can do the math yourself. I'm not saying to eat low protein, because obviously we need to eat more than this number is. But say someone gained 10 pounds of muscle in a year, right? That's, what is it, like, it's a little more than 1,000 grams per pound, 1,100 grams per pound. So that's 11,000 grams
Mhm.
of muscle, 11,000 grams of amino acids that they ate that ended up getting stored on the body. That's a lot. But but that's not really, because 70% of that weight is water. So only 30% of that number, like 3,400 grams, is the actual amino acids. The rest is water. So over the course of a year, of all the protein you eat, you get 3,400 grams of it gets turned into muscle. If you divide that out by each day, it's only about 5 grams of protein a day. So if all and I'm not saying eat 5 grams, obviously don't eat more than 5 grams of protein a day. But if you're eating 500 grams a day, or 400 grams, or 600 grams, or 300 grams, whatever you're eating, about the most you can hope will turn to muscle is 5 grams, practically nothing. So this is loosely related to what you said. So what I say with protein is, don't just throw, like, yeah, you can fill a water cup up by holding it out in a thunderstorm. But you're gonna have to pour 100 millions of water to get 1 cup of water. You can just throw protein at the problem, or you can go to a faucet, turn the faucet on, and be specific with it. And so that's why I adjust it. On the high day, we just don't need as much protein. It's
Mhm.
not bad if you eat it. You're still bound by your calorie limits. You're still stuck with that. So all that you're going to be able to do with that is, you're just not going to be able to eat as many carbohydrates. And then also, like we showed, most of that protein goes through gluconeogenesis and gets converted to glucose anyways, which isn't always a negative process, because that takes energy. That takes, up to 20-25% of the calories, probably more like 15% of the calories gets burned off just in taking this protein molecule and then breaking it all up and then turning it into a glucose molecule.
Right.
Anytime you build something, it requires energy. So there are some use cases for that, but that's the only thing is, I just generally put it lower on high day, because we're not, we're getting 5 grams of muscle growth at the most out of it anyways.
Mhm.
And then I would rather, we're bound by calories. I would rather focus even more on my calories on carbohydrates. Also, because the protein is going to have fat in it, so your total calorie count jumps up quicker per gram of protein than it does per gram of carbohydrate.
So when people are saying I eat a gram per pound, or 1.25 or 1.5 or some even higher,
Mm-hmm.
is there any justification to utilizing those types of formulas? And one would say, based on your response, then why am I taking in this much protein? Why would one still want to prioritize
Yeah.
protein, especially a very active athletic or a bodybuilder, that
Well,
type
that's
of
the problem. Do
person?
you want to be the guinea pig that finds that bottom number? I don't.
Right,
That's
right.
we and it's everyone who understands nutrition knows we don't need as much protein as we're eating. It's impossible. If you were converting, say if you're only eating 250 grams of protein a day, which would be low protein for most of us, if you converted 250 grams of muscle a day, that's like thousands of pounds of muscle a year. So if that worked, yeah, I would be 16,000 pounds of muscle. I'd have to get some kind of special crane to drop me on a stage to compete. But yeah, so I don't know the number. That's the problem. And that there is normal protein turnover. Your muscles need to be repaired. Smooth muscle, the muscle in your GI tract, your cardiac muscle. If I bump into a corner of a couch and I bruise my thigh, that tissue needs to be repaired, and that requires protein. Your workouts need to be recovered from. I don't know the number for that. I would estimate that's probably, for a guy your size, on the order of 50 to 100 grams of protein a day. On a day you work out and maybe do some extra stuff, probably 100 grams. So that you need that. You can't even think about building muscle until then. But then theoretically, if you nailed everything perfectly, you could theoretically get by with 105 grams of protein a day, and if your calories were right, and maximize muscle growth. But you can't, because there's more problems with that. If I buy a chicken breast and it says it's 25 grams of protein and 2.5 grams of fat for 3 ounces, I just put that in my log, right? It's a chicken. Every chicken ever born throughout history doesn't have the exact same body fat composition. You know what I mean? Can you imagine if because we ate, and I've told this 1,000 times, so people have heard it before, are rolling their eyes, but if we ate human meat, the average human's 15% body fat. So ground human would be 85-15. I'm not 15% body fat. So if you're eating me, you luck out, I guess. But the food label says the same. And then even on top of that, the food label is only required to be accurate to 20%, within 20%.
Right.
So, so whatever number you're reading, go up or down 20%. And that it could be that number. So there's a range. You might eat a really muscular chicken one day, the next chicken might have been some lazy gamer who had more body fat than you wanted. So yeah, so it's like, so for me with protein, we know all those things. What do we want out of protein? We want stable blood amino. We don't ever want low blood amino levels, because then we could potentially lose muscle. So we want a constant steady supply of protein. So we want whole food protein as much as possible, complete proteins, and we want nice, high, stable nitrogen retention. So I don't know what the minimum number is, but I'm not going to risk it by having a guy eat 100. But a lot of my guys, even big guys, will go like to a gram per pound or even a little less on high days. But most people are either, I guess really protein kind of bores me almost, because your middleweight competitor is eating 40 grams of protein a meal. Your super heavyweight that weighs, your like your Mr. Olympia competitor at most is maybe doing 70 grams a meal. So
Right.
that's our range. The gamut of the entire bodybuilding industry. You're going 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70 grams of protein. Because it's also because you can't do like 71 grams a meal means nothing, because you don't know if you're getting 71. You're getting somewhere around 70.
Okay. So let me
Totally long rant.
no, let me push you on this just a little bit, because I know somebody's going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And I said this is a self-serving interview because I want to know for myself. So if I told you, gun to your head, we had 15 seconds in an elevator, coach, I'm taking in 1.2 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass. Would you say that's fine?
Yeah,
You should
I'd
lower
say
it.
that is not, if you're not growing, if you're not progressing, that is not your limiting factor.
Okay.
It's carbs or fats, or you're not training hard, or your PEDs are bad, or your genetics suck. Protein at that point is you don't even waste your time trying to optimize it at that point, because there's no pinpoint optimization with protein. It needs to be above this level. We don't know how high above that level. 1.2 is definitely above it. So stick it there and start worrying about other things. If
Okay.
you nail all those other things, come back and revisit protein, see if you can fine tune it even better. But
So if
yeah,
I'm taking in my 1.2 and I've got my carbs dialed in,
mm-hmm.
I got my fat low, and I'm getting the result that I'm looking for, then that 1.2 is clearly fine.
Yeah. And if you were eating one and all those other things were the same, like you said, results. I'm getting the result. This is a result sport. We focus on all these weird little side things that don't mean anything. Like I just did a video about body fat percentages. People always send me photos and want to know what body fat they're at. Like, motherfucker, you sent the photo. That's you look at it. You compete by how you look. You
Yeah.
already have the full story right here. You want me to guess a number to see if I can guess? We know exactly what you are. Whatever that number is, that's what gets judged.
Yeah.
So we spend so much time worrying about little things like that. But yeah, if you're at 1.2 or whatever, like I said, if you're at 1 or 1.4, whatever your number is, if you're making progress, don't fuck with it.
Okay.
Find the thing that probably isn't optimal. We know this is enough. It seems like I'm making progress. Maybe I can dial it in perfectly, but there's a whole slew of other things with tons of room for progress.
So good. So with that being the case, then we talked about the biggest lever you can pull. Would that be then the carbohydrate and the fat manipulation?
Oh, for sure. Carbs primarily. Fats also, but from a calorie standpoint, but from a food volume and because fats are so calorie dense, and most fat sources have protein in it also. But yeah, your biggest, as far as everything, how big your plate is, how much food it seems like you're eating, how many grams, the number changes from extreme low for the week to extreme high carbohydrates by far varies the most.
Yeah, I would take in probably about 60 grams of fat on my moderate days. I would titrate that up slightly on my low days,
Yep.
and I would keep it as close to zero from exogenous fat as I could
Yep.
on my high day, which is
Yep.
pretty much what you recommend. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's really, and it's that simple. And you do that. If you guys listening, I like hire me as a coach. I definitely think you should sign up for Tone IQ because it's a university degree for basically free. But do all that. Don't do any of that. If you just take that and run with it for a decade and use sensible PED use, which most people don't. And when I say sensible, I don't mean like low baby doses. I mean smart use. You do that and do any kind of decent training for a decade, your goals aren't even you're not going to worry about them. You'll have passed them at some point long before you reach that 10-year mark.
And how would it be different for a natural athlete or a natural competitor? Is it
Just
the same thing?
no PEDs, and everything happens much slower.
Right.
All the bad things, I shouldn't say that. The good things happen much slower and less sharply when you transition, and the bad things happen much faster and much more sharply. It's just basically it's like running a sprint in sand. You know, you're still running the same. You know, you're still starting from your start, but you're just hamstrung by the fact that you don't have this booster.
So if somebody's transitioning into carb cycling and they're looking for that result, if they started with something, similar to what I recommended, start with maybe 2 grams per pound, or would it be two grams per pound of lean
Yeah,
weight
and
or goal weight?
well, people's metabolism is so different. That's why it's really hard. You know, you kind of just have to. I hate to keep going back, but that's why working with someone really could be a useful tool for people because they should be able to explain. You know, because it's a good start, but you need to understand, am I gaining fat too fast? Like
Right.
to understand when to manipulate it. But that for the average person with the average metabolism in the average case, that's going to be pretty darn close to optimal. But you're going to get, when you say averages, like statistically, the actual mathematical terms, you're talking like one standard deviation, which is at most 85% of the population. So you got 15% of the people who that's really just not going to, it's not going to work like it should out of the gate, and they're not going to know how to make the changes. But for 85% of people, yeah, you're going to get 90% of the way there. Just jump in on that.
And then
Yeah,
obviously,
worry about the specifics later. But that's another thing we do in the sport. We all get bound on the specifics, where the reality is it's like it's 10 years of doing the boring shit every
Mhm.
single day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a grind. It's lonely. You got to live like a monk, and it's repetition and
Yeah, yeah.
consistency. But something else that you've talked about is, you talk about metabolism and, for lack of a better term, almost training the metabolism. I like how
Mm-hmm.
you talk about bringing in the carbohydrate and structuring the nutrition to be able to take in more,
Mm-hmm.
to give you a longer runway
Yeah.
when you transition into getting it peeled, rather
Mm-hmm.
than somebody who is taking in the bare minimum or maybe too low, and then they have a much shorter runway to manipulate over time
Mm-hmm.
in order to get as lean as they want to get. So what's kind of the formula, not formula, but the
Good.
process, or
Good.
why do you try to bring in
That's a
more
good
food
question.
over time?
That's a good question because that's actually what you should be focusing on. You shouldn't be worried about adding size. You shouldn't be worried about bulking. You shouldn't worry about any of those things. There's two phases if you're a competitive bodybuilder. There should be the off season where you have two goals. Goal one is build your metabolism. What does that mean? I don't know. It means find a way at the end of the off season to be able to be eating more calories than you are now without gaining unnecessary body fat. And then the only other thing you have to do other than PED use, but we can cover that because it's so simple that it's really like it's a 10-second conversation, and I won't lie to you about it. But and then when you go to the gym, focus on making on some trackable metric of progress. I like progressive overload. There's whatever it is, something where you can get some level of verification that I made progress in the gym, and do those two things. And if you do it long enough, if you're eating 3,000 calories a day and whatever, squatting 300 pounds right now, and in 2 years you're eating 6,000 calories a day, not any fatter, and squatting 600 pounds, is there any world where you're not much more muscular? So though you don't have to worry about anything else, worry about those two things. So all off season, you be worry about metabolism. Why? Because it kills two birds. It gives us some better metabolism, and the more food you eat, the more you grow. So your goal should always be adding food without body fat. And then when prep comes, then you get to start prep with this crank in metabolism, not too much body fat, and then everything's easy after that.
Right. And then it's that long runway and a slow titration down to
Yep.
the goal of
Yep.
being absolutely
Yep.
peeled, right?
Yep.
And you have
Yeah.
more room to work with in
Yes,
that
and more.
regard.
Yeah,
So,
you got a bigger. I mean, you're driving a race, and now you have a really big gas tank that with a really good engine.
Do you
It's
find that,
much easier to get to the end result.
do you find many coaches out there are starting their people way too low calorically and just,
Yeah. It's you kind of people seem to drift to an extreme just in general. Either, and I ran into this for a while. I felt like because I had a couple guys who had for a while, like 2017, 18, 19, like Ben Pollock had like he gained 100 pounds over 2 years. Uh, 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 David Lamartine went from competing at 181 to competing at 261 to 281 in 3 years. John Rivas, I saw like a string of, and so I kind of got this reputation as adding size on guys. And then it's because it's not a single. I'm not a coach. I'm a coach with a client, and a lot of what you do as a coach, the client plays a role in that. If all my clients now are hyper focused on just getting huge, and a lot of them, they don't care about body fat, and all they care is the number on the scale. It's hard not, it's real easy as a coach to get kind of just accept that and be like, all right, well, this is what they want. They want to see 300 pounds. And then, and then I think the same thing, if a coach kind of gets known as bringing guys in shape, like the Matt Porter kind of used to be this way, where I always felt like his off-season calories were a little too low, but I could understand it from his perspective as a coach, is he's the shredded guy. If he needs guys as lean as possible going into prep because they have to be shredded on stage, or it really hurts his business. So yeah, I kind of maybe didn't answer it, but yeah, I think most people go too far in either direction. The guy, so a lot like I see King Kamali's guys a lot. I know he really pushes the food, and so I think they get a little too big in the offseason. But it's partly it's just kind of what you get known for, and your clients almost feed it. Because if you're known as the guy who gets everyone gutted out, shredded, the only clients you're going to get are the ones who want to suffer and kill themselves. So it makes your job easier. If your job is the guy who gets people huge, then you're going to get a lot of guys who want to get big more than they want to get muscular. If
right.
that makes sense.
Well, somebody like me that coaches more regional competitors as well as just Gen Pop, my biggest challenge is always getting somebody to increase their food right out of the gate. Because when
Yeah.
they tell me, when I see what they've been currently eating, it's terrifyingly low.
Yeah.
And I know their metabolism is shit, and we've got to
Mm-hmm.
dig them out of a hole. Based on the, social media presence out there and all the fad diets, and they're terrified to increase carbohydrate and all these
Yeah.
things. That's becomes one of the biggest challenges, which,
Yeah, the problem is nothing you see on social media is true. Nothing. I'm
right.
filming a documentary with Generation Iron for the last like 16 months, and it is all true, but it's really opened my eyes. It's like you do a scene, and yeah, you're doing your life, but there's a path they want the scene to look like it's taking.
Right.
And if you're a social media person, nothing they say is correct, or
Mhm.
even what they're doing, and even worse, at least with a personality, there's a face tied to it, and there's some sense of requirement where if I give shit advice, people know who gave it. The worst part of the internet is most of the advice you're going to get, and pretty much everything you read on the internet is wrong. And the reason is the person giving it to you is telling you what to do to get big, but it's not working for them. Because if it was working for them, they wouldn't be a nameless person on the internet. They'd either be a coach or a pro bodybuilder, or they're not saying they're the big one. They're saying they know how to get people big, and they're
Mhm.
giving away information for free on the internet, which means it wasn't valuable enough to charge for it.
Right.
So if you read it for free on the internet, unfortunately, not only is it wrong, but it's already been wrong and proven to not work for the person giving it. Because if it was working, they wouldn't be small; they'd be huge. So it cracks me up because almost everything I see, it's like, God, like, and I was in this world through the magazines. The magazines was a different kind of different, but I read the Weeder stuff, and I got 5 years of getting fed garbage. It did nothing to build muscle because why would they tell me the wrong thing, in the
Right.
magazines? And it's the same thing. And so that's the other problem is if you read online, it sucks because how else do you get information? But if you're reading it from someone you don't know and it's free, that means it wasn't good enough for them to charge for it, and it didn't work good enough for them to get big on it.
Right. That makes total sense to me. One of the biggest challenges also is, we live in this culture, and it's a challenge for me too, because I do work with general population and more regional competitors of all divisions. You got the big hot trends with a lot of the diets, and I fell victim to it for a time myself. Carnivore diets, ketogenic diets, low carb diets, and whatever. And when I went basically to a retooled 90s diet, I mean, think about how it's gone full circle. I mean, what did we do back in the 90s? It was chicken and rice six
Oh
times a
yeah,
day,
yeah, yeah,
and it
yep,
fucking worked,
yeah, yeah,
And now it's just become more nuanced as we have more information, and people like yourself are giving a more nuanced description of how these things
yeah.
work. Um,
And
what
I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is something because I always hate that I come across this way. I don't mean it's fun to talk about the complexities and the intricacies and all that. But to any young guy watching, uh, I'll tell you right now, test primobolan, meat, rice, train hard. Do that for a decade, and you almost don't have to worry about anything else. If you're eating meat and rice 6 times a day, training as hard as you can to where you're seeing clear progress, and you're taking tests and primobolan for your PDs, you're getting 95% of the way there. And by the time you get to that last 5%, you're probably a pro, and that's a good time to worry about that
Yeah, and
5%.
I've regurgitated your simple statement 1,000 times. Nobody gets fat on chicken and rice.
Yeah. My 600-pound life. That was the last time that I just can't stop eating chicken breasts. I'm Doctor. No, this rice is so. I can't stop eating plums.
So, this will piss some people off, but clearly I don't care because of the little internet war that I've been recently involved in, which is fine. But one of the arguments that I make to these people that are in the super low carb camp and they're taking in very high fat diets, and I tell them, listen, if you look at bodybuilders, there's something we can learn from that culture. These people are some of the most dedicated toward learning what it takes to get big and
Mhm.
shredded. They've devoted their entire lives to it. That's all they care about. And if you were to poll 10,000 physique competitors, probably 9,950 of them are doing carbohydrates to some degree, some form of carb cycling, whatever, prioritizing some protein, and they're keeping their fat low. And then you get people out there in the space that say you don't need carbohydrates, they're dangerous, they're going to kill you. Insulin, 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 which these people don't know how insulin works.
Exogenous insulin will actually keep you leaner.
Exactly. And
I can like explain the process too.
why do guys inject insulin? Because it's going to get them leaner. But what would be your argument to somebody? Why is having a carbohydrate based diet going to be far more productive for anabolism and body composition than somebody who's on a high fat, low carb diet?
No, well, it will be for a robot, and this is part of the problem is that humans aren't robots, and so a lot of what draws people to the different types of diets is that it tends to have foods they like to eat. It's easy for them to follow, and so there's that plays a role. But the reason is we just said, like, you can do the math. You don't have to take my word for it. See how much muscle you gained in the past 365 days, turn that poundage into grams and realize that only 30% of that is muscle, and then divide that by 365. That's how much protein each day you're turning the muscle, and it's on the order of a couple grams. So right away, we all are stuck with that. So for me, it's, well, what else is going on with building that muscle? Well, we weight train. What's the main driver for energy, for ATP production and weight training? Glycolysis. That comes from glucose. And what can we manipulate the most through? Because like you get depleted in fat stores, that's great. They deplete, but you don't like restore them the way you will with glycogen. The only thing that we can manipulate, you can't change your protein stores unless you want to lose muscle and gain it back and forth across the week. The one thing we can really manipulate and change our body is glycogen. And so you get that. And then the other thing that you said with insulin. Now, insulin, so the way insulin works, it's a ligand binding system. There's an insulin receptor on every cell in the body. And insulin, if you picture, this is the zinsulin. If zinsulin floats around.
Here, I got mine.
Nice. Where's my ATP? This and ATP. Well, here's my ATP, but Zin and ATP is that drives my world right now. But so this floats by and it binds to this receptor. It binds to insulin. That it's like in the shower where you turn the thing that opens the drain. Insulin does shuffle some proteins around, and boom, now it's a drain that nutrients go in, amino acids, carbohydrates, and so it just increases the uptake of the things you need to the cells that need them. You lose that with really low carb diets. But I don't care what people do. Again, we are all bound by thermodynamics. You have some calorie expenditure, and you can only eat enough. You can eat up to that many calories before you start storing extra calories in the body, probably as fat. So however you make up the macros, if it's working for you, that's great. But I mean, there's several clear processes, like with what we did with the high day, where we can kind of hack the thermodynamic system, create the same total weekly calories, but maximize the number of those calories that come from lost body fat and minimize that come from glycogen. You don't have that really with a low carb diet. You're just kind of glycogen depleted permanently. What benefits do you get from the fats? Well, fats are anti-inflammatory. That's great. The problem is that hypertrophy is an inflammatory process. Mm-hmm. if you're on PEDs, you're probably not affecting that. And if you're off PEDs, you're probably getting enough benefit from hormones from the fats that it's still worth it. So that's basically what fats do. They affect hormones. Well, if we're injecting hormones, we really only need the minimum number of essential fatty acids to make sure that we don't run deficient in any of that. And with the amount of food a big guy's eating, they're going to get that from their meat. I add fat on top of that also most days. So it's not like a fat's a risk, but you kind of lose out on several things that we know improve anabolism, we know improve training energy, we know improve recovery, and we know can improve hypertrophy by what insulin's effects on the body. It will, but you can't guarantee it, but it's because it's a secondary effect. But insulin does do that protein shuffle and allows the nutrients to come in. You just lose all that with other types of diets.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're bad. And there are cases, like I said, where if like a carb-cycling diet, you have to be on the ball. You're eating different meals every day, different amounts each day. You need to know what you're doing. You need to, where like carnivore or keto is easy. It's not easy. It's difficult in other ways. Like you can't eat out as much. You can't eat at events, but you don't have to think. It's just just don't eat carbs. So like you always, as a coach, you're not working with robots. I can write the perfect diet, but then I have to take this diet and make it the most perfect diet that this client will follow. And I do have clients over the years, not that often, because carb cycling, I know it's the best. So if we can do it, I'd like to. But I have one client, Jake Apple, right now, who's almost turning pro. We are carb cycling, but his diet is 4 meals a day, moderate carbs, and very high fat. He's got digestive issues, so we work really hard in keeping inflammation as low as possible, which is hard because we're in the gym causing inflammation every day. But yeah, so I'll do whatever works with the person, but it's going to be a rare case, almost always with additional circumstances that anything other than the carb cycling approach will be optimal.
Okay, that was what I was looking for.
Sorry, I was so long-winded.
No. It was actually perfect because I say the same thing. I work with people on carnivore diets. I work with people on ketogenic diets, and I've been on record for years saying if what you're doing is working for you,
yes,
then continue to do it. However, if you come to me and say, I'd like more muscle, I'd like to be leaner, I want to compete, or I want to look like someone who does, then I'm going for optimized.
mm-hmm.
And I have found, as many of my clients have found, and just about every physique competitor out there, apart from a few outliers, has found that having higher carbohydrate and lower fat is the way to go. And, people just don't want to hear that, but to hear someone like you say, here's why that approach might be more optimal other than keeping the carbs low and the fat high, that's going to resonate with a lot of people. So that's why I wanted to sort of hear that from you.
I think there's two main reasons, at least for the layperson, maybe not a bodybuilder, but someone who doesn't really understand nutrition all that much. The two main reasons why a low carb approach seems ideal. Well, one is you go low carb, you lose all that glycogen and water. So you lose a bunch of weight. Your body composition actually gets worse. If you did a hydrostatic testing, all that water, the hydrostatic tester looks like they think you lost muscle. You didn't lose fat, but your buoyancy hasn't changed, but now you weigh less, because water is like whatever weighted with the water. So if I'm holding 20 pounds of water at the same body fat, my body fat percentage is lower. So actually body composition technically gets worse on a low carb diet for that reason. But if you are trying to lose weight and you lose 10 pounds the first week and you don't understand that like the scale isn't measuring fat loss, that's great. The other thing I think is people don't understand the burning fat thing, because I hear all the time, well, you're eating fat, you're fat optimized, you're burning fat. Yes, the fat you eat. You still will only burn stored fat from the body if you eat less calories than you burn, the same as it would be on any other diet.
There's a difference between burning fat and losing fat.
Yeah, you're burning fat because you're eating the fat.
Right.
The only way you burn fat from the body is if you eat less calories than you burn, regardless of what kind of diet it is. So there's that other thing. But there's stuff like being in ketosis, the sustained stable energy levels, the no mood swings like that. There are some things that are worth it to people. But if you're a competitive bodybuilder, it's a much harder case for me to make.
Yep, I agree 100%. Just wanted some people to hear that, to let them know that I'm not out of my mind. And,
or we both are, maybe.
or we both are. But I think we're in good company with a lot of people out there, yes, who have produced amazing physiques, and having some carbs didn't kill them. And most of these people out there throw the term insulin around like it's this horrific hormone that should never be elevated. And I keep saying, well, these people don't understand how insulin works,
Yeah.
and that it is a storage hormone, yes, but you decide what is stored, and there's
Yeah, and that's the key. The fact that it's a storage is why it can keep you leaner. So, and I'll give it just a quick analogy. Let's say I'm eating this diet, whatever this diet is. I'm eating this diet on my high days, in my high day diet, and it's working. I'm not gaining body fat. I'm getting stronger. I'm building muscle. It's great off season. Now I take that exact same diet and I apply a little bit of insulin to it. Not enough to go hypo, because then it'll make me eat more calories than I know. But I know this calorie count in this macro works. Now I've applied this insulin, and now from those same calories, more of those calories can potentially be stored as can be synthesized as new muscle, because maybe not very many, but we don't need much. If we get a tenth of a gram every time we use insulin, that we're talking, what is that, 5% of our muscle, 5% increase in muscle growth just
right.
from a tenth of a gram. And then also you got that glycogen. So now you potentially are storing glycogen that otherwise would have been gone through the fatty acids and process and then stored as fat. There wasn't room to store it as glycogen without the insulin. Those calories are still floating around, so your body stores it as fat. We lose both of those. No, it's not dramatic. It's not hundreds of calories a day, but even if it's a half a calorie a day, there's 300, or even if it's a calorie day, it's going to be more than that, but there's 365 days a year. In 10 years, that's 3,600, in 20 years. And so it doesn't, that's where it adds up. It's not a big difference, but if you use insulin on your high carb days and do it such that you're not going hypo, that's what makes people fat. They go hypo and then they eat a whole bag of cereal to not die. You eat 3,000 calories, yeah, you gain fat. But if you take the same diet that was already working without insulin and apply a little bit of insulin to optimize it, you all you do is that from that same calorie content, you're increasing the amount of it that gets stored as muscle, increasing the amount of it that gets stored as glycogen. And since the calories are the same, by necessity, that decreases the amount of fat that gets stored.
Outstanding. Well, I think we've made our point with diet and carb cycling. That was eloquently put. Any last Justinisms on diet
I know.
before
I think I
we?
touched all five of them. Everyone watching that's watched me, that's what I've been hearing. It's so hard to, because you get asked the same topics, and apparently I just tell the same stories. I'm turning into an old man who tells the exact same story every podcast, but hopefully people got something out of
No,
it.
that's excellent. Oh, so briefly, and I want to be very aware of your time. Training. Are
Mhm.
you a higher intensity guy, a volume guy? What does that look like for you? And what?
I'll try to be brief, but this one would be a longer one. Uh, I've been around long enough to see several phases of, we know from science this is what builds muscle, and each of those phases has been different. And so right now it's very exciting in that this is the most active research and training focused on hypertrophy by far in the entire time I've been following, which is 30 some years if you count college and everything, or high school. There was almost historically never any training research. If there was, it was for Olympic lifting and
Mhm.
track and field. So we're getting really great information. Problem is what we're learning right now is the thing that builds muscle is going to change over time. It's very unlikely we 100% nailed it. So I don't know what builds muscle the best. But I say training is more emotional than the diet. For the most part, if you're competing in bodybuilding, you don't have a choice. This is what works for the diet, eat it and deal with it. Training, you have to be excited for the workout. You have to be motivated for the workout. You have to enjoy it. I could write you what I know is the best training plan possible. But if you hate it and you dread going to the gym, it can't be the best for you.
Right.
Now and everyone knows these guys that do these weird workouts, these weird routines, but seem to get results. If you're so excited for your next workout that you struggle to sleep the night before, like it's Christmas morning, well, even if it's not that good of a workout, you're going to get productivity out of it. And in the end, from my end, from what I've seen, nutrition is almost always the limiting factor. If you're on PEDs, it's almost never PEDs because everyone just jumps right up to higher doses than they need now, which is fine. But for the most part, PEDs are no longer an issue. When guys were doing like 200 milligrams a sip a week as their cycle, you could run into a case where that was the limiting factor. When guys are running a gram a test as their second cycle, you're never going to be limited on growth because of PEDs. So it's always diet, because even anyone who's training hard, even if it's misguided, the limiting factor on how much growth is able to come from that workout is probably diet.
Right.
It's very rare that it's training, because everyone trains hard. And most of us, if anything, train more and harder than we should. And if anything, we've swung too far. But for me personally, I like progressive overload type stuff. I like a clear metric. I got stronger. The difficulty in that is we're not powerlifters, and you can quickly become a terrible bodybuilder by focusing only on moving more weight to such a case that you stop using the correct muscle to move that weight. I can curl 225. My biceps aren't curling 225.
Right.
My biceps struggle with 135. But I can curl 225 and say I got stronger by using my back and basically not using my biceps at all. That's the only thing that the trainer has to be careful of with progressive overload.
So for me, I enjoy a higher intensity, lower volume style of training.
Mhm.
And even
Yeah,
though
so if I gave you Jay Cutler's workout, you want to, it'd suck. It might
yeah,
be a great workout. Yeah, same.
you know, after 45, 50 minutes, maybe an hour, I feel like at that point my body is pushing back
Mhm.
and I feel like I'm getting diminishing returns. The pump's not as good even at that point, but if I go balls out with good form, with everything I have for 45 minutes to an hour, I've always gotten the best results that way. And to your point, I fucking love it.
Yeah,
I'm having a
same.
blast.
Yeah,
I look forward to every workout. It's the best hour of my day.
yeah.
So
What day is
again,
today? Tuesday? No, it's leg day.
yeah,
It's like
exactly.
that old meme.
So just to reiterate, find the training program where you are achieving progressive overload, and the style with which you implement that is based on your level of enjoyment that keeps you consistent and keeps you coming back to the gym and mentally, I guess, stimulated to continue to look forward to it, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, and you want a mind fuck on training and nutrition. Another one. Uh, so what muscle growth comes from muscle protein synthesis. Something stimulates the muscle to synthesize new amino acids. When does that happen? Following training, obviously, is part of the recovery from training. When else does it happen? Muscle protein synthesis is elevated almost as high for an hour and a half after a meal as it is following any weight training session. You can find there's research articles on it. So, so if you eat 6 times a day, it's not much different than getting 6 workouts a day from the muscle protein synthesis standpoint. So
Wow.
already our workout is only 1/7. If they're not equal, they're not going to be
Mhm.
exactly. But if we said they're equal, already our workout is only 1/7 of the muscle stimulation of the muscle protein synthesis stimulation we get for a day. So we're like, you want your workouts to be good, but if you look at it that way, it's only 1/7 of what's causing the new muscle growth. Obviously, I'm not saying, it's not important, because if you're not doing any training, the other stuff doesn't matter anyways. But when you're recovering from training, your muscle protein synthesis peaks after a meal. Now, the training played a role in that because it's also causing the need, but those are when your muscle growth peaks are the highest. And then even further, if you're using PEDs, the majority of the hypertrophy and muscle protein synthesis pathways that come from PED use is not directly correlated with training. It's those other things, the spike after a meal, the elevated nitrogen retention. So really, there's like whatever, 7, 8, 9, 10 chances on any given day where muscle protein synthesis can be dramatically elevated above baseline, and only one of them is the workout.
What do you advocate a higher volume of food on the pre and post workout meals than
They're
you
always the
do?
biggest meals of the day for
Yeah.
me. Yeah. I mean, not like dramatically different, but they're separate. When I write a diet plan, I have workout meals and regular meals.
Mhm.
And so, like, if you have 6 meals a day, you'll have a pre workout, an intra workout shake, our field rations almost always, and then a post workout meal, and then 4 regular meals. And so you can move those 3 workout blocks to whatever time of day you train. But those, there is not, and again, it's not dramatically different, but those will always be higher carbohydrate primarily than any other
Right.
meal of the day.
That's what I do. That's what I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And do you advocate meal frequency being high, 5, 6 meals a day? And if you
Yeah, I don't know
do,
what the number is. You don't want to eat once a day, because you just think anytime your blood aminos dip below a certain level, and it's called the rate limiting amino acid. It's the essential amino acid that's in concentration at the lowest percentage in the body or in a food, because that's how much muscle protein synthesis can occur. Doesn't matter what everything, you can have thousands of amino acids of all the other ones. If one essential amino acid is missing, no muscle growth. So you need to keep blood aminos at a certain level, and then make sure your rate limiting amino acid is above a certain level. The way to do that is just eat meat protein,
Mhm.
whole food complete protein that digests slow and has a really good rate limiting amino acid level. How frequently, I don't know. probably not 6 times a day, because everyone's like got sick and thrown up. I've told this story 1,000 times, but I tell the same one because it makes sense. You get sick and you throw up and there's like chunks of steak in your puke and you're like, fuck, when did I eat steak? Has it been like, so I don't know. So in that case, obviously that steak is still getting broken up and getting, but because same thing as like with the protein, we know we're only converting 5 grams of it to muscle, but I'm not going to eat 5 grams. I don't know how much we need. I'm going to make sure I'm above that number. It's the same thing with that. I just make sure you're above it. I don't know what the minimum is, but I never have someone less than 4 meals a day, and almost never more than 6, because at that point it's like adding a 7th, 8th, or 9th meal. You're basically just eating one long meal at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I eat 5 meals a day, and that seems to be my sweet spot.
That's what I've fallen into. I used to be 6, but as I get older and busier, 5's really been my sweet spot.
Outstanding information. And that last bit I forgot to add, and it was one of my bullet points. So I'm glad you kind of
Oh,
indirectly
nice.
brought it up. But uh, I know your time's valuable.
Oh, I
Uh,
don't mind. I'm not having a blast. He's been great. This has been like the exact things I wanted to talk about. So I'm not in any hurry, but I have a thing at 4, but we still got half an hour. So
oh, yeah. Okay. So expand then on whatever you would like to expand on, or wherever you feel like we missed a point or a topic here, whether it be nutrition, whether it be
I'll just
training.
kind of do a general thing. Just like the industry is great right now in that there's so much information in both areas. As a new person, it's great because there's more information with the internet than there ever was. As a business owner or coach in the industry, it's great because there's more money in the industry. There's more people in it than ever. The problem is it's just way more murky. And like we said before, almost everything you read is wrong. And even worse, and I do this too, when I'm doing like most like our Twitter, I do a lot of Twitter style posts, and my daughter actually runs those. Those are just from Troponin IQ. But every time I see one, I'm like, yeah, that's correct. But I hate it because I got to turn this whole topic into 5 slides with 100 characters. And that's what everyone has to do. And then even more, you realize what gets engagement. What if I talk about the protein? If I try to actually educate people with protein about that, I'm not going to get minimal engagement. I'll get a few people like being like, "Oh, this idiot thinks you only need 5 grams of protein today, moron." You don't
Yeah.
get it. If I get on there and say everyone's eating too much protein, you're all idiots. You only need this much, even if it's wrong. Boom, engagement sky high. I'm selling shit, and so that's what everyone does. So I don't know the solution to it, but I can tell you that there is good information. I hate to keep plugging my Troponin IQ, but I just think that it's like it's $450 a month of coaching minimum, because it's even more because it works. You can ask it 24 hours a day. We've already had people win shows on it. We have coaches using it with their clients. We're getting a great response, but you go on there and you bypass all that. You don't have to do that, but if you're not going to do that, find a good education tool otherwise, like J3U is good, Anabolic Bodybuilding, Paul Barnett, those are good. But be very careful with anything you read from an influencer in a real length format, because it's almost impossible to make that correct. And you don't even, as the influencer, they're not trying to. They're trying to make it so that it boosts engagement, which usually means it makes a large portion of the population think it's wrong and they hate it. So I guess to boil it down, if you're a younger guy and you want to make progress as fast as you can in the sport, test and Primobolan in the off season. You could only injectables, 2 compounds. Take your test, put your Primobolan at about, if you can get Primo or EQ or DECA or MPP or whatever your favorite anabolic is, your non-test mild anabolic. Keep that at about 80% of the test dose. For at least a standard deviation of the population, at least 85% of the population, you can just do that and nothing else. The AI effect of that Primobolan or EQ will be enough to not have to take an AI. That dose ratio will be enough that you don't have to worry about blood work and health hardly at all. You test in Primobolan basically maximizing as far as hypertrophy you can get, because you can push the total milligrams per week up as high as you can from any compound without risking side effects.
Mhm.
So you can maximize your total milligrams per week. You're not using orals that mess up your esophageal lining, mess up your stomach, mess up your blood pressure, cause issues with appetite, ruin your liver values. You're avoiding all that. You're not taking tren or harsh compounds that affect all those things. So you're maximizing muscle growth, allowing yourself to take the most amount of gear for the least amount of risk. And then on top of that, you end off season as healthy as possible. So then when you go into prep, you can throw the kitchen sink at it without worry. So that's it. Now off-season gear is taking care of you for the rest of your career. You just take those two and keep building it up each year until you get somewhere in the 2 to 3 gram range. Again, standard, about 85% of the people will find that if they try to take more than 3 grams of gear a week, nothing bad happens. They just don't grow any better.
Right.
And
Right.
at worst, they start feeling sluggish and lethargic and lose their appetite. But there's seems to be around that range where you just kind of saturated everything. And the limiting factor is never the gear at that point. At that point, the only way you can improve is better training, better diet. So do that. And now while you're training, find a training you like, and that there's some way you can tell whether you made progress. And it's progress on muscle, not just progress on getting stronger in a movement, or progress in something that has nothing to do with hypertrophy, and stick to it. And then eat meat and rice is, at least 4 times a day, preferably 5 or 6. And if you do nothing else, you don't even think about anything. You just, it's been 3 hours. Let me get some portion of meat, some portion of rice. I don't even weigh it. You do that for a decade and you'll win any state show in the country if you have the genetics for it, which
Right.
most people would.
And for the natural athlete, it's just
Yeah,
back to what
sorry.
we talked about. It's meticulous diet, meticulous diet,
Yeah.
meticulous diet.
Yeah.
Because,
Unfortunately, they don't get to go just be that, just do that. And you're pretty much good. They have to be more careful. But
yeah, because I do work with natural competitors. And then,
Mhm.
of course, the Gen Pop, crowd are predominantly natural unless they're older
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
on hormone replacement therapy.
That's
So,
changing. That's been a
yeah.
dramatic change in the last decade. It's
Eh,
gone from not you have your competitors and your Gen Pop who don't use anything, to now you have your competitors and your Gen Pop who are on TRT.
Yeah, and I actually heard you talk about that. It made so much sense when you're talking about a guy who's in his 40s or 50s or 60s. It used to be such, everybody was terrified of the stuff. And you were mentioning it like, if a guy who's 55 years old with low T, if he brings in a reasonable dose of prescribed testosterone therapy, maybe a little bit of, 2 IUs or 3 IUs of growth hormone a day, he's going to be better for it. And
Here's a good example. Remember Wilford Brimley?
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Or any of those guys in the 80s. Wilford Brimley, I can't remember if it was the Cocoon or one of the whatever, like one of his famous things. He was 46.
I know. I saw that.
Yeah, okay. So Wilford Brimley's 46, not on TRT, obviously. Brad Pitt is 61. Tom Cruise, I think, 63.
Yeah.
Okay. So now obviously how you look doesn't mean everything. But these guys are almost 20 years older and they are still sex symbols. Wilford Brimley's was everyone's grandpa at 46, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
And he looked like he was 66.
yeah. And so, yeah, I'm not advocating for, but like if it's done properly and you're putting your body's hormones in the level it was when you were optimal, when you were 23 years old, it's hard to say it's not fun.
Oh, for sure. And, me myself, you always get the comments, okay, oh, you're on steroids, you're on gear. And I'm like, I've been transparent about it. I've always said, if you ask me, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm trying to compete at a national level in open bodybuilding in the NPC. Of
Mm-hmm.
course I am. However, if I tell anybody what I'm taking, they immediately call me a liar because it's not
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah.
It's reasonable dosages that work extremely well for me. And it's only during contest prep. And I'm fully comfortable that when my contest prep days are over, which could be after July next year, then I'm to a reasonable dose of TRT, maybe a couple IUs of GH, and I will do that to thrive
Mm-hmm.
and be the best man, husband, father, and grandfather that I can be, and coach, trainer well into my 60s and 70s. And I'm unapologetic for that. So people have to stop demonizing it, and I think it would be fair to say that there are even some pros out there that aren't doing as much as some of these kids
Oh,
at the local gym getting their shit in the back
there
alley.
is after like so many years, there is almost zero correlate. If I put out 25 cycles on one side of a piece of paper and 25 photos of competitors on the other side, it'd be no different than random luck number generator on how accurate you are. You would never be able to pick. Not that the big guys take less all the time. It's just there's no correlation. Some pros take, like, you'd be shocked. Some pros take a lot. Some amateurs don't take much at all. Some take a lot, but there's no correlation. And which is
Mhm.
why I say with the gear, yes, I went through that phase. I remember doing my first cycle, growing like crazy, thinking like, I found this magic land. I want to try all of it. I remember that. And I remember wasting 2 or 3 years doing that before I finally realized like, okay, I still want to learn about all this stuff, but my growth stalled. I shot up. Now I'm doing all these. What am I missing? So I can't stress enough. If you're yes, PEDs work. Yes, they work really well. No, you're not going to be Mr. Olympia without them. But it's much more simple than that. So whatever you're thinking, they're not your answer.
Right.
They are part of the answer, but whatever it is, you can try all those cycles. Just please, 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 if you want to get far in the sport, put that on the back burner and say, whatever I'm doing with all these, and I still am going to try everything. I know this guy at the gym told me that if you mix these two things, go ahead and still try it. Just know that just know that that isn't the solution. You don't know it yet, but in the 5 or 6 years, you're going to learn it isn't, and you'll be happy you focused all this time on nutrition.
Yeah, it all goes back to the diet. So it
Mm-hmm.
just goes full circle back to the diet. Outstanding. Um, does that back to, because I'm going to get asked this a lot.
I want to say with the TRT also, no one needs to do what's best for you.
Right.
And certainly if you get on TRT, your cholesterol goes to shit, your blood work's not good, your estrogen's good, that's not for you. But if you're taking it and you feel better, have more energy, sleep better, and your blood work's good on it, I mean, then use it for we are in a modern society with lots of really cool things being created, optimized, and generated right now. If they can improve your life, don't go into it with some weird thing like, these people might not like it. If it improves your life, let it improve your life.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that your favorite Marvel actor is doing it,
Well, yeah, and you're a coach in the industry. Every once in a while you'll talk to someone who's their coach.
Yep. 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 So, but again, for the natural athlete and the Gen Pop people, focus on your diet, nail that. Don't fuck that up. Don't eat garbage. Don't eat shit, because we live in a lazy, weak culture where nobody has any discipline whatsoever. And you and I come out of an era that of supreme discipline. And unfortunately, with social media, like you were very eloquent to suggest, that most people are lying to you. They have a
Yeah,
product to sell, they have a brand to keep up based on how they can maintain, sub 8% body fat year round, which is also a terrible idea.
yeah, yeah,
So, that we have to be very, very well aware of that. And I do see a little bit of a trend, even at the higher levels, of coaches talking about health and talking
yeah.
about getting the blood work done, and yourself and Chris Tuttle and some of these guys. And I think that's a refreshing take as well. I don't think you saw as much of that back in the 90s and
Oh
early
God, no.
2000s.
And I think
So,
it's kind of because at first when you started talking about, I think there was pushback. Like uh, being healthy doesn't mean you have to do. You can still optimally grow. You can go the full pro bodybuilder path. You just there are ways to do it where you don't come out dead on the other side. That's no one's saying like be healthy, like you got to stop bodybuilding. We're saying we all love this weird ass sport that's probably not good for us. Here's a way to do it and come out the other end still healthy.
I remember another question, um, as we were talking about that post show rebound.
Mm-hmm.
I've also described it as post cut rebound for somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's not competing. You get down to, because when I talked about being sub 10% body fat, when you get down to an extremely low level of body fat, like a competitor does, or somebody who's trying to get shredded for a beach vacation, and as well as I do, a lot of them come off the show. They eat everything that's not nailed down,
Mm-hmm.
for months. They put on 50 pounds, turn into water buffaloes. The best time from a physiological level to recomp and build tissue is the 4 to 6 weeks post cut or post show.
By
Is that
far.
true?
Oh, by far, yeah. If you're not permanently, your first couple shows, once you're weighing 290 in the off season, you're not adding 40 pounds of muscle in a
No.
rebound anymore. But your first shows, yeah, for anyone doing their first, second, or third show, or even more shows if they haven't utilized this yet, probably 75% of your entire hypertrophy progress for the entire year can happen within the 6 weeks after the show. And that seems like a lie and not confusing. And so, since I don't want you to trust the process, I'll explain it. You come on a diet, your insulin sensitivity is sky high.
Right.
So we're getting the maximal benefit out of that. Our appetite is sky high. You can eat plain oatmeal by the bowlful. So you're never going to get that again. By late in the off season, you're sick of food, so you get that. Your metabolism is it's a weird thing because it's actually sluggish because you've been low calorie and dieting, but because you've been moving, it's ready to just explode. It's basically been held back because you've been calorie restricted. So your metabolism is like, what the hell is this guy doing? We're doing cardio every day, we're working out, but then he doesn't feed us. I don't know what to do. Your thyroid's trying to downregulate. All you put some food back in it, and you'll know right away you are hot as shit. Your metabolism is
Hmm.
flying, and you're motivated, and you're lean. So you have a state. Imagine if you could build a bodybuilder, if you're playing a video game and you get to start out where you have this guy where he can add 10 pounds of pure fat and still be lean. He'd still
Hmm.
have abs, and his appetite is unlimited, and his metabolism is only going to get higher pretty much predictably and consistently every single week for at least the next 4 weeks. And his insulin sensitivity is sky high. It's like,
Right.
yeah, you'd think this game's, what kind of cheat code did I put in? Up, down, down, left, right, A, B, start. If you're an old Nintendo guy,
Is
but
it continue?
Yeah, so that's really all it is. And then also, you're probably not accelerating myofibrillar growth much more than you are the rest of the year, the actual protein structures. But we know 70 or even more percent of the muscle is sarcoplasmic tissue, water, glycogen, and all that stuff is more than maximized. It's hyper maximized in the post contest period. So you're creating an infrastructure to facilitate myofibrillar growth the rest of the year. You're increasing blood vessel density, capillary density. Your blood vessels are dilated, which creates more surface area because nutrient transfer crosses the surface. So volume is length times width times height. So volume is length cubed. So for every little bit of volume increase, the area is only length squared. So you get a cubed area that gets transferred in the square area. So when your blood vessels dilate, the nutrient absorption actually accelerates much faster than that dilation rate. You got that going for you. Your motivation sky high. So it's just you don't get that any other time of year. So, and then the other thing that's kind of counterintuitive in the sport with PEDs is people do PEDs. They think the way you do PEDs is wrong. Your highest doses should always be when dieting. Your lowest doses will always be when growing. And and people do the opposite because they want to, like, guys always be like, I think I'm going to drop down to TRT and do this little diet. It's like, no, you lose all you just create a case where your body's like, oh, this guy wants to lose muscle. What you want to do is higher doses when dieting, because that'll allow you, especially when blood androgen levels are climbing, you can actually synthesize muscle in a pretty deep deficit. And anytime blood androgens are really high, you can synthesize muscle at a pretty good clip, even in a deficit, which those calorie energies don't go away. So if you add even 5 grams of protein a day in a deficit, that's 20 calories of fat that has to get burned because that has to balance out. There's just like, so the rebound base, like the basic rebound toolkit, the standard deviation, what will work for 85% of the people is going to be take your off-season cycle from the previous year and then do 60% of those doses. So a pretty mild cycle,
Hmm.
a little more than half. Keep JH out for the first couple of weeks and then ride that carb cycling and try to ride it like a wave, like you're a surfer, where your appetite will increase as you add muscle and as the food increases. And so what you're trying to do is add size, add food, add appetite, and keep your appetite just above the food. So you're always wishing you had a little bit more food, which is hard because the first thing you want to do after a diet is eat until you're not hungry anymore.
Right.
But you can eat, but if you can do that, you can just keep riding it. And it feels unlimited. Eventually, you hit like that 4 to 6 week mark and those things just start fading off. But during that time, week after week, you can increase food, your metabolism increases, your appetite increases. It's like a magical period. And a lot of guys miss it because a lot of the people that do coaching are pros who no longer benefit from the rebound,
Right. Right.
for lots of reasons. But they're not going to add 40 pounds anymore. If you're competing at 265 and you're 8 years a pro, you're not adding 40 pounds in the rebound. If you competed as a middleweight and it's your second show, the rebound's your chance to be a light heavy next year.
Well, would it be fair to say to a top pro who's been told you need to bring up this lagging body part or you need a little bit more size to go from top 10 to top 5, even at that level, they're still
That
going
would
to
be
get
the
some
time.
benefit from the rebound, correct?
Absolutely. That would be the time to get it done. That's probably the only time they'll have a chance to. Because if you made it that far in the sport and that's still a weak body part, it's not gonna come up magically by just changing the angle of your elbow on a movement, or prioritizing it in the week and or whatever. So you're gonna need a little extra oomph, and that's the one chance that they'd be able to get it.
Well, and this sounds simplistic, and tell me if I'm wrong, but when you go into that rebound, is it because your body coming off of that deficit and being so lean, it wants to store. So if you're eating garbage, it's going to store fat. And if you're eating clean, it's going to replenish glycogen and
Yeah,
be
yeah,
more
more or less.
anabolic.
But that's kind of all. Like your body doesn't not looking to do anything. It's just our bodies are just like if you. I think it's almost easier if you look at it like a gas tank. Like we're if you just view our body as like a 3 tank sack of a meat skeleton or whatever, where you're just filling. And so they're just empty. I mean, and they're empty like beyond empty, that beyond any case they've ever been in their life. And so it's yes, it is looking to store. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, mean, the more I think about it, I don't have any complaint with that. It's just, it's not your body's not making a choice in the decision. It's
Right.
just, yeah, it's it.
And based on what you feed it, then it acts
Exactly. Yeah,
accordingly based on the cleanness and the macros manipulation if done properly, and you be in a better environment to grow
exactly.
other than put
Yeah,
on
because
fat if you're
it
eating
is.
pizza
I
and
guess it is
donuts.
looking to store because technically your metabolism will be sluggish. So at any
Right.
like it is going to look to store, and that's yeah. The more I'm like reasoning this through, it's even more accurate. I think yeah, because even more so, you're not going to get if you just feed it pure junk. What you're going to do is you're going to saturate that hunger like cascade that we were trying to ride, and
Right.
you're gonna reach the point much quicker where your appetite isn't sky high. You kind of lose that whole thing, and you've added body fat quickly. So yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I'm gonna refine that further and maybe do an article on it. But yeah, that you eat junk after contest, and that's what like you're kind of amplifying the amount of junk out you're going to get. And if you
Right.
eat good, you're kind of amplifying the good you get.
And I'm experiencing that now, and I've talked about it at length on social media. As I mentioned before, the morning of the show, I was 191.4, and I'm just not even 4 weeks out from the
You're
show,
not
and
on
I'm
91 right now
I'm
unless you're 2 feet tall.
215. I'm 215. I still have well exposed abdominals,
Mm-hmm.
vascular, striated. I look great. I feel great.
It's the best
Obvious,
look. It's the best
it's a
going out in
great look.
public look.
It's a great look, and even my wife is like, "Holy shit!"
Mm-hmm.
And it's she's like, "Who is this Justin Harris guy?" And
That's the only half the reason you compete is for that those 6 weeks after. That's like the only time you get to walk around feeling like because it's man, it's fun. You're just so full and round and lean and strong and hungry.
yeah, and back to the show itself, when I told you I titrated the carbohydrates up on peak week, and I told you like on day one it was 80, then it was like 150, then it was like 220, then it was like 300. And after the show, everyone, including the promoter, Kevin DeHaven, came up to me at the night show after I'd put in another 100 grams of carbs and said, "Holy shit, what did you do between prejudging and
Yeah,
the finals?" And I said, "I had another 100 grams of carbs." And everyone agreed that I probably could have doubled
yeah.
everything that I took in on that peak week. So instead of 80 on Monday, it could have been 150.
I would. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
And because you talk about spouses and people who have been with you through preps. My wife's been through all of them with me. She's not a coach, she's not a trainer, but she knows me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how we all say the Sunday after a Saturday
Yeah. Oh
show,
yeah.
"Man,
Yeah.
I wish I looked like this at the show." But that's not accurate because it's not the same under the lights. It's not the same on stage. You just look
And
fucking
yeah,
great.
and it's a big risk.
And
Yeah,
it's a
you
risk.
probably could have done better, but what if it didn't? Like it's a weird thing because that's why I don't like when guys are trying to do that like perfect peak and doing too many crazy things. You always miss the mark on that. You just don't.
Right.
There's been like one perfect peak in the history of bodybuilding, Jay Cutler in 2009. I mean, really,
Yeah. Yeah.
there aren't. They just don't. So all you're trying. There's two phases to prep. There's get all the fat off. How you look doesn't matter because it's going to change when you tidy it up at the end.
Mhm.
Get all the fat off, and then at the end, it's make that look better. And the confusing thing is the get all the fat off requires you to eat really low calorie. And oddly enough, the thing you do at the end to look better almost keeps happening better the more you eat. But
Right.
it's a hard mental thing because you don't know again where that limit is. And there's no worse feeling than being like, oh, maybe I can eat more, and it's too much.
Right. Yeah. And back to my wife, and I had a couple people helping me through this prep, and everyone agreed my Sunday look, now that look would
Mm,
have been better because I took in more carbs. But you learn, I learned
yeah.
on this prep, oh, I did carb cycling this time. It was enough to win my class. It's taken me where I want to go for nationals. But clearly, what we learned through this is I could have took in more.
Yeah.
So you take that experience, you learn from it, and still being obviously careful. But there was no one who didn't disagree that my body accepted the carbohydrate very, very well during the peak
Mhm.
week, especially. And I probably would have been better and fuller and still shredded as hell if I took in a little bit more. So,
Yeah, and I think,
um,
and I don't have any real scientific data on this, but it sure seems like from my own experience that that people who've gone through an entire prep where they've done the high carb days and they've had the periodic cycling respond better. Their body's not as shocked by the carb influx in peak week. Where if you've gone very low carb all diet and then you start throwing carbs at it, it's a bigger like shock to the body than you want. You don't, you want the peak week, you want everything you're doing, you should be able to say, I know this will make me better, and there's no way this can make me work worse. If you
right.
do that, you're always good. The risky part is when you get to where, geez, I'm pretty sure this will make me look better, but there's a small chance it'll make me look worse. And that's the kind of the area that I think you want to stay away from
Yeah, in
because you just
2020
don't. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
and in 2021, I made the mistake of doing way too many low carb days.
Yep.
Over dieted. I still had enough to win my class, but then in that year, it was only like 6 weeks between the qualifier and nationals in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
So I made the incredible rookie mistake of saying, "Oh, diet harder now
Yeah.
because it's a national
Those are
show."
rough 6 weeks.
And I
That might as well be,
dieted
that's six
harder.
years in real time.
Yeah, and there was like days where I was eating nothing but fucking white fish and egg whites. That was it.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I couldn't drop another ounce of body fat. Everything shut down. My mental clarity was gone. I didn't know where I was. I mean, I was probably a candidate to go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And then when I got to nationals, then we tried to carb it back up and ate all the wrong things and completely panicked and freaked out. And I went from being stringy and over dieted and looking like shit to looking like an over carbed water buffalo looking like
Mm-hmm.
shit. And so, I hated it at the time, but it was a great learning experience of knowing exactly what not to do. Whereas this time around, incorporating a lot of your principles, everything worked better than it's ever worked. And now I know I don't have to go to zero fucking carb for 6 weeks. And, I can take advantage of carb cycling and manipulate it properly to bring the best physique I can. And it gave me that longer runway, to slowly titrate down and dial it in and find the look because we're chasing a look, not a weight necessarily. So,
Yeah, and
uh,
one thing that I think is really important, actually, is you said like you knew you could eat a little more carbs, so you had a good peak, you looked good, you did well at the show, and you have a little, you already know it, you have this little improvement in the bank that you get to cash out in the next prep. That for me, like sometimes I almost think like you don't want to nail it perfectly because then what do you do after that? It's a good feeling going into the next show, knowing you know a path to be even better. I think because there's no end date, unless you're doing your last show, there's always the next show.
right.
And it is even though you'd love to nail it perfect every show, that's not going to happen. So if you can come out of a show where you pretty much nailed it and you also know a thing you can do even better next time, that's ideal.
And front loading the carbohydrate worked so much better because in the past I would load at the end of the week
Mm-hmm.
after continuing to deplete into peak week. And
Yes,
that didn't
that's
work well.
yeah, and I'll tell you why. Because glycogen is requires three things: glucose, obviously, carbs, but water and sodium
Right.
to form glycogen. And it's 4.5 times as much water as it is as glycogen. So I like to carb up early when water's high. We're not trying to dry out because once you dry out, we've got two things. It's like the carbs are trying to pull water into the body. I'm drying out trying to get water out of the body. Which one's going to win? But both of them can't win at the same time. So I try to ideally I like to have you full a day out. Then the last day, all we worry about is drying out and not getting flat.
Right. Which is exactly what I did.
Perfect. Yep.
And didn't cut water to
Yep.
zero, didn't drop sodium,
Yep.
and everything worked
Basically, everything we
spectacular.
learned in the 80s and 90s, we're finding out
Exactly.
was
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. I had a panic brain dead moment at nationals in 2021 where I implemented 90s style bullshit in a frantic desperation move, and it did nothing but crush me, and it was the worst look I ever had for my first national show. So live and learn. But
You going
Uh,
back to the '90s and Dorian, just to kind of cap it off here. We've all had the truth thrown in our face our whole life. We just always refuse. All those the '80s were the worst, but '80s and '90s, all those weird tactics and tricks. And who was the king of it all? Dorian. And
yeah,
what when they asked Dorian, he's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I had a glass of white wine the night before the show."
yeah.
Doing all that stupid shit. We have the guy winning it all, telling us everything we're doing is stupid, but we still can't wait to try all this weird shit.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like, John Meadows said, just be fat free,
Yeah,
and
solves everything.
you have to change very little, if anything,
Mm,
if you do it right.
yeah,
And that's exactly what happened to me. All we did is slowly bring in some carbohydrate, didn't change the water, didn't change the sodium.
perfect.
Everything worked as well as it possibly could. And we've collected data to make it a little bit better the next time. So
Sweet.
hopefully things will go well next July. It's 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
I know you're
I'm
busy,
getting
and
I'm getting the finger snap.
I am just honored, like you wouldn't believe, that you agreed to speak with me and ramble on with this guy, with me for 2 hours, and I appreciate it. So, man, I can't thank you enough, and thank you for your time and all your valuable insight. I know my viewers are going to be stoked. Tell my son Tyler hello. So,
What's up, Tyler? I hope you like the podcast.
that you just made his year. And maybe down the road I can have you back if you would be so
Yeah,
gracious.
I'll be
And
back. I'm kind of thinking. I mean, I really kind of haven't done podcast with the supplement stuff. It's just been so hectic. But I was just. It's funny. Like the day you emailed me, I was telling my wife, I was like, I kind of want to get back into doing some podcasts again. So it was perfect timing. But yeah, I'll be back on if you want me for
I
sure.
would love that. And where can people find you? I know it's pretty much your website because I know
Mhm.
people are going to be curious about
Yeah,
troponin
if you just
IQ.
Googling Justin Harris nutrition, but if you go to troponinnutrition.com, troponinssupplements.com, or troponiниq.com.
And that's where they're going to find the app if they're interested, all of your amazing supplements. And brother, I appreciate it like you don't understand. And I hope I have the opportunity to speak with you again. And best of luck with all of your endeavors. And thank you for honoring me with this interview.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. It was great.
All right, brother. Thanks again.